Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We have special guests for you today. So the webinar is how Ping Identity uses Postman across the API lifecycle. And let's go ahead and go through a few housekeeping items. So if you didn't realize yet, you are muted. Attendees are muted, but the fellas from Ping, as well as myself, we have all the power and we can actually say things. If you have a question to ask, I see some people have already discovered the chat area, and that's a good place for you to interact with each other. But if you have a question for one of the panelists, one of the people that you see up on your screen, please ask your question under Q&A. So in Zoom, you should have, I think it's 2 over from chat, a section called Q&A. Go ahead and ask your questions there. Besides the faces that you see on your screen, we have a bunch of people waiting in the wings to answer your questions too. So if you have a question that occurs to you throughout the webinar, go ahead and ask it in the Q&A. And the question that everyone has probably asked, and they have is, yes, a recording of this session will be shared with you. So if you registered for this, you'll receive a copy of the recording as well as the slides that are up on the screen right now. And the last thing I want to point out is we do have a survey. So these types of webinars are developed for you because you're the ones showing up to listen. So thank you for joining us. At the end, please stick around and complete the survey because we do take your feedback very, very seriously. And that's all the housekeeping items. Remember to ask questions in the Q&A of the Zoom toolbar. All right. So welcome to this webinar. My name is Joyce. I work at Postman. I'm the Director of Developer Relations, and I'll let you guys go and introduce yourselves. Gideon?
Hi, my name is Gideon McKee, and I'm a software quality engineer at Ping Identity.
And I'm Jason Hatchett. I'm a product manager of developer experience at Ping Identity.
And my name is Anthony Dombrowski. I'm a developer advocate at Ping Identity.
All right, so we have, I'm not sure we've had this many people on a webinar before. This is kind of a different format. If you've come to a Postman webinar in the past, thank you, welcome back. This is a little bit different format that we're playing with, and you'll notice that I'm the only one from Postman here. We have 3 people from Ping. This is a behind the scenes look at Ping's journey with Postman. So, you know, we've interacted in the past. Anthony, you and I have done a live stream together. We've talked a bit before. We've worked on your collections, and some really interesting stories started to emerge. So this is the first time that we're really shining a spotlight on a real use case. Particularly, we're going to go into some advanced Postman workflows so we can learn from some of the mistakes that you guys have learned from and some of the better practices. We also have tips for onboarding developer experience. And lastly, just throughout this entire time, we're just going to talk about recommendations for how you can get a little bit more out of Postman. So even though it's Ping kind of describing how they're using Postman, this is a way that Postman, I get to talk with people like Ping all the time, and I get to kind of like filter through it and then share it with the community. But this is straight from, I don't want to say the horse's mouth, but straight from Ping's perspective of how they're using Postman. So let's go to Anthony. Anthony, I know you've explained this to me before, but will you please tell me, what does Ping do?
Sure, yeah. So applications are going to inevitably have users with some kind of protected or secured account, right? So they, meaning access is behind a login screen. And it's not immediately obvious, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes concerning security and the user experience that you need to think about. So Ping provides a SaaS platform called Ping One for Customers, which, by the way, just won the API World Award for Best in Enterprise APIs, that exposes all this through APIs. So you don't have to go through the tedious and risky process of trying to build all that stuff yourself. And
yeah, so it looks like we already had a question that is answered in the chat, but what is Ping? So you're, you know, a big company that handles enterprise identity, authentication, authorization, is that correct?
That's right, for the workforce and customer use cases. So workforce identities being like employees of a company, having an identity system behind that, the directory, the security, the user experience, single sign-on, everything like that. And then the customer use case, right? If you're going to a page to buy something, you probably have to log in to purchase, you know, to go through the checkout process or something like that.
So if I'm like a independent developer and I'm making my own web app, I can roll my own auth or I can use your products. Or if I'm at a very, very big enterprise company, our single sign-on might be using Ping.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have some like 60% of the Fortune 100 or one of the fortunes. So a lot of big enterprises use us, and it's really, really, there's a lot of security and best practices and stuff that you have to worry about if you roll your own. So.
Okay, cool. And really, I think who we have to blame for this webinar is Gideon. Gideon, look at you. You're wearing a tuxedo. Thank you so much for getting dressed up for this webinar.
I keep it classy during quarantine.
So it really started with you, right? You're the one that brought Postman to Ping.
Yeah, well, I was going to say something that people might not like, but I'll say I was the first person to catch the Ping bug.
Here, let me hop out of this screen share for a second. But tell us a little bit more, like how did you get started with Postman? How did you learn Postman? How did you bring Postman to Ping?
Yeah, so I had heard about Postman. I was, temporarily a recruiter for a while, and I had received from a coworker a tip that if you're looking for people working with APIs and they use Postman instead of like curl or JMeter, that means they're like thinking about their tools. So then when I ended up switching over to be a quality engineer at Ping, funnily enough, during my interview, I got my first chance to use Postman, and I've basically loved it ever since.
Wait, so you already use Postman, but they asked you like a question about it in your interview?
No, I hadn't used it.
Oh.
There was an exercise where you needed to test an application, and Postman was there in case you had time to do API testing, which I didn't, but I at least got to play around with it.
So then you interviewed, you learned Postman, you played around with it. Why did you start using it in your real job?
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely beginner friendly, but then allows you to keep adding more value to the testing that you're doing as you learn the more advanced features. So from not really understanding HTTP very well and being a newbie to the API side, I was able to immediately get use, but then also gradually become more sophisticated over time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people like Postman because it's very approachable and accessible, but then they never kind of level up. But it sounds like you really leveled up. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when I was first using Postman, I didn't want to manually make every request that I needed to. And so the ability to use collections and save requests that I needed to make often kind of just got me on a trail where there were like tedious things I wanted to do, like copying and pasting UUIDs from one response to another request and chain them up together. And when I realized that Postman could automate that for me, I started doing it, and then just kept adding nice quality of life improvements to those collections.
Yeah. So how did you, I don't want to keep making this joke, but how did you infect the rest of the Ping team, or how did you inspire the rest of the Ping team to start using
I'm not sure what a better metaphor is, but I'll say that I started sharing them with my immediate team, my little bubble, and it was a good thing. People could make requests and they didn't have to think about the mechanics of every single request. So it became easier to do multi-request workflows and do stuff ad hoc, and especially test features that were where the API work was done, but the UI wasn't there yet. Ping One for Customers likes to call itself API first, and it really is, because I can start testing things where the API level is there, and then the UI will go on top of it. And I'll say the big turning point was there was an internal demo where normally it's just different teams displaying the feature work they've done. But one time we had a gap in scheduling, and I was like, well, I'll just demo my Postman collections because I've put a lot of helpful stuff into them and I can share them out with people, and then they can use our services. And I was hoping that it would inspire other teams to make their collections so that I could use their services. And eventually that is what happened, sort of. But I
So you
suppose
just
we'll get to
shared
that.
it. You shared it, and immediately they were like, "This is amazing. Let's start using your collections."
Not immediately, but it picks up faster than I expected. You see what I call my little fingerprints showing up in unexpected places. Like by default, when I had a create environment request where the name of the environment was something like Dread environment, like DREDD, like Judge Dredd. And so anytime I'd see someone in a demo using a Dread environment, I'd be like, oh, I I see you're using my collections.
So you would see the little like lingering, you called it fingerprint, but you would see
Yeah.
dread in the API call and you'd know that they were using your collection.
Yeah, I guess a funner example is the other QA on my team, her name ended up as the default user information. And so then there were just a surprising number of Angelas across
Yeah,
the platform. Yeah.
yeah.
Guys, is there going to be any Postman on this webinar?
Anthony, you're rushing me. Okay, let me go ahead and share some slides again. I was hoping to look at your lovely faces, but let's go ahead and share the slides.
Yeah, I can definitely pick up from here. So I'm going to be doing a live demo to kind of demonstrate how you can improve your collections. And everyone likes listicles. So on the next slide, we'll see that I have 5 level ups you can use. Number 1, you want to put your requests into collections that have folders. Number 2, you want to use variables. Again, think passing data from one request to another. Once you have variables, you want to put them in environments inside Postman. That allows you to more easily manage them with scripts that can do helpful things and power up your requests. And finally, you want to put documentation in your collections as close to where they will be used as possible. And we can go to that.
So you're a test engineer, but and you're going to show us kind of QA best practices, but all of these are function agnostic. I can tell you like a tech writer or just a developer, backend developer or DevOps person would be able to, I think, use every single one of these level ups, correct?
Yes, these are all things that any collection will benefit from having.
Okay, let's see.
All right, and first a little setup on the next slide here. I have a scenario. And so to give some context to what I'm going to be doing, as Anthony mentioned, Ping One for customers, the way I explain it is you build an application and there's going to be like a sign in button. And the sign in button is just a magic box that signs the person in and then brings them back to your application. You don't want to think through the details. That's what Ping One for customers is for. I mean, you have to hook up the wires, but we handle the actual authentication piece. So this is a scenario where I'm going to be showing you in Postman, I get an access token that I can use to make administrative calls. The first administrative call is going to be creating a population, which is just a place to put users. I'm going to then create a new user as if someone had registered and give them an initial password. I'm then going to set up some details so that I can mock out like I'm logging in with my application. And then finally, I'm going to build a request that I can do a login with. So yeah, that's the scenario. And we can kind of hopefully move into the demo here. Let me just...
So yeah, you were saying that you can actually make these your API first, which means that sometimes you have these APIs running before you have any UI. So instead of clicking a box on the web or in the application that instead of walking through that workflow, you're just going to walk through this workflow in APIs, correct?
Correct.
Cool, yeah.
All right, so let me grab this. And hopefully everyone can see my Postman there.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to start off with is my recommendation 0, which is just, we can see here on the left, I have the history view in Postman, which is, I think, the default. It's been a while since I've started fresh, but this is just past requests you've made, and they're not really reusable. Like if I wanted to target a different application on something like this, I would have to manually do everything as if I were generating an entirely new request. So I'm going to clear these out, and I'm going to show you the collection view. So once you start having requests and building them using the new feature and saving them, you can organize them into collections. So number one, my recommendation of thinking about how you organize the requests inside of the collection. So this is an example of, I just alphabetized all of the requests. And this is a subset. This is like 25 requests. We can see here, this is something that we publish for people to use, Ping One for customers, and it has 271 requests. So it has folders. I think you can imagine it'd be pretty hard to find requests if you had a list that long. So instead of using that collection, I'm going to show you a couple of ways to organize these same requests. A good internal way to organize requests can be just naming the folders or the different collections after the service that makes the request. This is usually what I work with because, again, I'm like spinning up a service and that is very relevant. But I'm actually going to be working with and doing the demo using this organization, which is I've chosen functional objects that an end user will be more likely to care about. So for instance, here underneath applications, I have a subfolder called app secrets. Now on the back end, this request is actually handled by a different service from these requests, but the end user probably doesn't care. So this is it hides that information from them because it's not relevant. All right, now I'm going to take you through the scenario I mentioned earlier. I'm going to get a token, and I'm doing this because I want you to live the experience that I lived.
Is it okay that we see your access token?
Yeah, it's good for an hour. And as a heads up to everyone, this is all happening in the context of a trial account that I've set up. So
no one try to hack us.
Don't hack me live. Wait till later when I've deleted it. But I'm going to create a population. So I'm going to grab this access token, and as a bonus, I'll show you as I get further down, there's actually more secure ways to have your collections. But initially, if I want to create a population, I have to paste in this token. And then I'm able to create a population to keep some users. And I want to create a user now. I have to paste in that token and do that. And you'll see that I made a mistake because here I need to put in a population ID. But the population ID is generated dynamically when the population is created. I don't know it ahead of time. So let's see if I can paste it easily. And now we can see that I've created a user. And similarly, if I want to, I'm going to give that user a dummy password, and I have to copy and paste this very long UUID. In this case, I have to paste it into the URL bar, which is even worse. And again, I have to go grab this token, copy it. And again, hopefully you're getting very tired of copying and pasting, as I was initially.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to finish off here. I'm going to create an application. This is also hopefully convincing you that I am really doing this live, because it would be really tedious otherwise. So I've created my brand new application that's going to revolutionize the world. And I'm going to grab its ID. And then this is the last step. I'm going to do a login through that application as if I'd come from that application, and I'm doing a login as my newly created user, and then I'm going to come back to the application. And instead of doing this API only, I'm going to go to this little code function just so that I can copy paste the URL a little easier. And so now if I go into a private tab in Firefox.
We did this on our Twitch stream, right, Joyce?
Yeah.
You can see that Example is a great company. This is our customized branding. And hopefully you can see that there's nothing up my sleeve here. The reason I have to change the password is that I administratively reset it. And so the admin knows the password. Oh. All right, awesome. And that is probably the only time I'll go through that full example. But I wanted to show you that I'm back at my application with a token, and this represents the user having authenticated. So that was definitely painful. It was meant to be. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to close all but the current tab. And now if I scroll down a little bit further to variables, this is my second recommendation. I've still got this access token. Let me make sure that's in my clipboard because I want to show you now my populations request. When I go here to authorization, this is the syntax for a Postman variable, the double braces. And right now there's no value for Postman to grab. So I'm going to quickly use the global scope and save that. And so now we see that it's using that value. And so I can send the request. And that didn't save a lot of time because it was only one request. But finally now, this request will already be using that same value because it's just using the variable. And so if I edit this with a new token, it will affect all of the requests without needing to copy and paste. Now it's not ideal because, let me see. I still have to grab this population ID, but at least now that it's a variable, I can similarly speed up if I'm doing multiple requests. So again, pop ID, I can set this once here. And now if I create, maybe I want to create like multiple gods. Jason, am I spelling this correctly? I know in the practice I was. Anyway, so there's multiple users. And similarly, if I now go over here to reset the user's password, we can see that there's a variable in the URL. And I'm not going to finish the full scenario because I'm going to do it a couple more times. But this is definitely, I think, an improvement over the first time. I don't know. I know Anthony really loves copying and pasting, so I don't want to take that away from you, but most people don't.
Copy
All right.
pasta.
All right. So now we're on to recommendation number 3, which is once you have variables, you want to start putting them into environments. So I'm going to show you this token request again. And now we can see that I have variabilized this UUID because all requests, they're based on the environment that you're in. And similarly, I'm going to show some details that I didn't show before. This is client ID, and then if I show password, it's actually a variable. So unless I hover over this, it won't display the value to everybody out on the webinar. And this is a great thing to do because it means you can have secret information that is not hard-coded into your requests, but that you can use the environment switcher, which I'm just going to use the drop-down since I've created these environments here. Now this turns orange and we see that I have a client ID. And again, this is orange. It has a value now. If I send this, it will get me an access token.
So you started with copy paste for every single step of the workflow. And then you kind of streamlined it a bit by adding those double curly braces environments, but you were still copying and pasting into a global variable?
Yeah, first a global, and then now I have this switchable, what I call, you want environments based on context. So to kind of further the context of what I'm using, this is the same request. This is me getting a token, but I now have an extra variable. So instead of saying ping1.com, ping1 actually has an Asia Pacific and an EU deployment for, so that data can live where it needs to legally. And I can show you that if I use the EU environment, this variable is set to ping1.eu. And then if I use the North American environment, Postman environment, this is set to ping1.com. And then I'm going to use the little eyeball here. So this shows you I have these variables and they have values. And then we can scroll down. We can see I've got my environment ID. Anything that's handy to have will be in here. But I think as you were getting to, there's still an improvement we can make, which is step number 4. I don't want to copy and paste anything anywhere except possibly like a client ID and secret from my web browser into Postman in an environment file. So when I start adding scripts, and I'm just going to close all but the current tab here, this is that same request that gets me an access token. I'm going to go ahead and fire it off so you can see. There's my access token. And on authorization, it looks all the same, but I'm going to go for the first time to the tests sort of drop down here. So I call these scripts because you have pre-request scripts and then you have post-request scripts. Post-request scripts are called tests because they're often used to kind of check things, and so they act as tests, but they can do a lot of utility functions as well, because if you are writing code, then the sky is kind of the limit of what you're doing. So let me...
Wait, how many, like, did you just replace all of those with all of those individual requests with scripts by adding scripts?
Kind of. I'm going to walk through the whole scenario, and it's going to hopefully clear things up. So this is just the one request where I get a token. But notice now in the console, I made a post request, and then I get this message that says token is set, which is right here, console.log token is set. And what I'm doing is I'm parsing JSON-data.access-token. And so this string here, right, is being saved, pm.environment.set. And so now my token variable in Postman has this value. And you can check that because when I open this up, we see that on the left there it says token. And that's the exact same string, right? Jason, confirm this is the exact same string that it's over there.
So you're parsing the server response to save the variable what you previously copied to your clipboard.
Exactly. And that means I do not have to copy this. I do not have to paste it. That value is already here in this request when I send it off. And more importantly, let me kind of close that down here. The access token is already here in this request. And so there it is. This has the same body as before, but the ID of the population has already been set as this variable. Yeah. So when I send it, we'll see that the population for this user is this ID that was dynamically created. And that's because here on the test, I did the same thing where I created a population and then the server response came back. I found the ID and I did postman.environment.set population ID. And then that just showed up in my environment so that value was saved without me having to copy it from the response to anywhere. It's just already there. And so now that we have scripts, I can do just really awesomely send I've reset the password. And then if I go over here and I want to create an application, notice I don't need to worry about any of my values because the values are already good. And similarly, when I come down here to my authorize request, there are even values here that are being taken care of, including there are some pre-request scripts which set certain values so that if I were to send this, we see that it sets state as a random UUID. And then when I come back here, we see that it had a value for the state. And that happened before the request was sent. So again, once you have scripts, there's just, the sky is the limit. You can do anything that you can code up.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Gideon, you did an amazing job just like walking us through that and explaining it. But I think the idea of scripts in general, much less the tests tab, is a little bit new for folks. So if folks have questions, remember to ask the questions in the Q&A. We do have Postman people to kind of talk about that. But this is, hats off, Gideon, because that's the power of the scripting sandbox for Postman, you're just making an API call and then dynamically setting and getting information from the server.
Exactly.
It's got to streamline so much. It's like almost as easy as the UI here. So it makes Postman that much more useful.
I do sometimes joke, Ping One for Customers has a great UI. It's called Postman.
We're going to make that a video clip.
Oh, no. All right. And then scripts are very deep. Again, if people have questions, we'll get to that at the end. But let me stay on time and get to my last recommendation, which is documentation. So again, just clearing my tabs. And I'm going to go to just an example like create user. What I was showing was kind of the limited set of attributes that a user can have. In reality, on Ping One for Customers, you can have so many attributes on your users. And
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, that's continuing my Mercury theme. If anyone picked up on it, and so I don't always remember what all of these are, and I know they just released it. There is a way to inline comment on these request bodies, but I wanted to quickly show. If you expand out the request and you can go over here to edit description, you can type markdown. And so you can create a table. And this is an example of something where instead of having to look up the validation on different user fields, when I create a user, I have it on my request. I don't have to leave Postman. And if I do, I can put in links. Like if I clicked that, it would take me to that RFC. And this would tell me what the validation rules are. And then I even have little stuff at the bottom like, what does this regex mean? Because you can see there's some regex there. So yeah, having documentation in line, this is what I mean. Although there's even like here, where if I show, this is a request that has a lot of parameters. This is an OAuth, OIDC authorized request. And so I can put little notes on, hey, what exactly do all of these parameters do? What are the options for them? So yeah.
So this is an internal collection. You're using it to share with your team members, and you're still adding the markdown table. You're still adding these notes here in the params description. Is that like feature notes for you? Is it for your team members?
This is for me and anyone it benefits, but I would have these, I put all of this stuff into these collections for me first. And I was just glad that it benefited other people. So
we do have a question from the audience. This is amazing. I love those scripts. I love those examples of how you would dynamically set something. This is specific for your internal APIs, but are you sharing these collections, these test scripts externally at all?
Not at the moment. Anthony can take that away.
I haven't migrated that over to, because a lot of the stuff, the notes and descriptions and stuff here, I took and made into our public collection. So you can see that in the API network. But yeah, the description stuff, I have to do a little bit more work there to get that migrated over.
Okay, so audience, we're waiting on Anthony for that, but we will get to the Ping public collection later in today, right?
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
Very soon. I want to close out and say, if you're curious about code, these all started like this function here is you have this little snippets area that you can paste in. So it says like status code is 200, and that'll get you started real quick. So I'm going to go back here if we want to go back to the slides now.
Okay, let me take this over. Yeah.
And just to recap real quick, because I know I covered a lot. It's 5 things. Number 1, collections and folders. Number 2, variables. Number 3, variables inside environments, scripts, and then inline documentation, which just means your documentation is already where you are using it.
And I love that you called it inline documentation, because a lot of people think of Postman documentation as what's published to the web, but you look at that regex. I call it regex, not regex. But look at that table. Look at that giant markdown table. You're communicating and showing people how to use the API, and I consider that documentation.
Yeah. And next slide, I guess. This leads us right into the question which you might be having, which is, okay, I have these awesome collections. What do I do with it? And I'll go right over to Jason, or maybe he's over there.
He's up there for me.
Okay.
At the top. Yeah, just to introduce myself again. Hi, I'm Jason Hatchett. I'm a product manager at Ping Identity, and I kind of deal with the whole developer experience, which, is APIs for a lot of people. So in my day-to-day job, both myself and actually Anthony too, we talk to a lot of customers who are trying to integrate these identity sequences into their own applications. And usually that involves using our APIs. And as Gideon just showed you, we have a lot of different API requests that do a lot of different things. And identity itself is a very hard question of how does all of this work together? And so we're trying to make that as easy as possible with our APIs and with other documentation. And so I'll actually hop over to some of that right now as I steal the screen.
Yeah, it's even beneficial for sometimes when I'm debugging with a customer that we can pull up the same Postman collection. I say, go look at this request, try that out, see what you get back. So it's real nice for debugging.
Yeah, so this is our API page.
It's Anthony.
And yeah, you can see Anthony has tons of videos all throughout our site.
It's another cringy video, Joyce. So
they're all great. Everyone should watch all of them. And this is near the very top after our getting started section, but we actually link to this run in Postman with this button right here, and you can download the whole Ping One for customers Postman collection. And you can get a lot of the same requests that Gideon just showed. He has them organized differently for the purpose of this webinar. But all of those requests exist both in this collection as a downloadable, you can just pull straight into Postman, as well as throughout the rest of our APIs. And to hop over, you can also find them in the API Explorer in Postman. And you can even see that you can choose the language you want to have those requests in if you're actually developing side by side. You want curl, Java, JavaScript, etc. And also all of that documentation that Gideon touched on at the very end that he's written. We actually, I believe this is the stuff that you wrote, right, Gideon, that is included in these requests?
Yeah, that's a screenshot of the same stuff I was showing in the description.
So all of you out there, you can get the benefit of something our developer wrote as he's trying to, make his best experience. We pass that on to our customers to make sure, they have the best experience trying to implement all of our APIs. And we really like the way that Postman did all of this. You can see these requests in the corner, choose the language. So that actually informed how we wanted to push our API information a little bit easier. You can see we even have these like double braces here to say that that's a variable you should be changing. But having all of these different language, and in case no one noticed, I did move back to our API docs, which we'll show the link for at the end of the presentation.
Well, that looks like Postman docs for a second.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very sneaky.
Wonder how that came to be.
They were very, very much inspired. And I mean, these are using, I believe, the Postman things behind the scenes a bit, just because we were so informed by them. And you can change to jQuery. And one thing we added on top of all that is this try a request button. So you can actually, if you didn't have a Postman client yourself, but you wanted to test out those things. Of course, you don't have all the bells and whistles Postman does, but you can actually do a request directly from your browser to the Ping One servers. But this is really useful for a variety of reasons. As I said before, Anthony and I are jumping on calls with customers all the time, and they're asking us how to do these things all the time. We'll actually walk them through some of the stuff Gideon showed of just how they can make their lives easier, like just putting stuff into a collection or an environment so it's easier to figure out later down the line. But also just in general, the organization of everything, knowing which steps come after which. Documentation is both active and passive. So reading this, but also being able to run it yourself and know, oh, that's what that does. Now I understand that a lot better. It's something we want to pass on to our customers.
I really like that thing that you added at the bottom that allows people to have that interactive bit, because I think people learn when they're not quite getting the response that they're expecting, and they can tweak things. I mean, that's part of the reason why people like using Postman. So the page we're on right now is your developer docs, correct?
Yes, this is the apidocs.pingidentity.com/ping1. I had it open in 2 tabs, but yeah, and then near the top here is the run in Postman. You can see a Postman collection if you wanted to find that immediately upon hitting the page. We also have stuff linking to our other sample code, which I like to tout because I'm responsible for it. Well, I didn't write any of it, but I'm responsible for it.
So you have a separate section right there, right below that, right below sample applications that says Postman collection. That's this. That orange run in Postman button, we didn't talk about, Gideon, while we were in the Postman app, but that run in Postman button is just the embedded version of what Gideon was working on. Yeah, so you can pull it into Postman and start working with it.
I won't sign in or anything, but yes, that is how you get it directly.
And then go to that second tab you have there. So that the first one was the run in Postman button, and then this one is officially what Postman documentation is. So can you scroll all the way to the top? I know this is a beautiful, beautiful markdown table, and Gideon spent time on it, but yeah, scroll all the way to the top.
I'll just click on introduction.
Yeah. And then can you scroll up? Yeah, so that run in Postman button is also there in the top right. So it's the same thing, like you're reading the web documentation, you get to poke around and Jason, I like the way you said it, passively kind of like read it. But then once you're ready to interact, either on the Ping developer docs page, you could do it in the page, or you can click that run in Postman button to start interacting with it in Postman.
Yep.
Neat. Is there anything else you wanted to show us here?
Not from my browser, no.
Okay, let me go ahead and take control.
Yeah, and then just to reiterate, we want to make it simple. We want to show real working examples. So on those API docs, you could definitely see examples of what to do step by step. And you want to have your users know what to expect when they're jumping into your platform. So if any of y'all are going to try a Ping 1 trial after this, you can get a good idea of what all the functions you can do just by reading our API docs that are completely accessible.
And I think this is a very simplistic slide, like deceivingly simplistic, but this is, I mean, Jason, isn't your title like developer experience? Like this is all about developer experience. These are like legit best practices that if you take like a documentation workshop, like TLDR, this is what it is. And I think a lot of people watching at home, watching this webinar at home, don't know about documentation in general, but how you can format it in a way that's really consumable and useful for your people.
Yeah, not just from the product side, but from the marketing side too, right? Documentation is the new marketing. So a lot of time spent for me there digging and making sure that's approachable and easy for our customers and prospects.
Documentation is the new marketing. We're going to take a little clip of that.
Yeah, we actually say that in a lot of our meetings, just so you know.
Okay.
We were driving that point home internally. Anyways, I think we're going to hand it over to Anthony to kind of recap everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So we went over kind of the Ping's journey, the infection that spread from Gideon's internal use, eventually sharing it out broader to his team and further out to the engineering team, and then making it to the end to our prospects and customers there out on the web. Gideon showed you 5 recommendations for leveling up in Postman, really good tips there to start getting more efficient with your Postman use. And then we covered how to share your API with customers with that run in Postman button or the API network. And then we've got some additional resources on the next slide here if you want to kind of poke around and look at some stuff that we showed you here.
Yeah, so we'll, in addition to sharing this recording of the webinar, we'll also share the slides. So lots of the websites or the pages that Jason was showing us, we have links to that here, as well as the Postman API network, which I don't believe we actually saw a look at. So take a look at the Postman API network. That's that's another way you can explore documentation. And then number 6 on there, I did include a link to the live stream that I did with Anthony, because Anthony, you hyped it and you said it's the most fun you'll ever have with OAuth 2.0. And I said, yeah, because said no one ever. But that was truly fun. And we stepped through step by step, copying and pasting, just the way you saw Gideon do. We did that step by step. And then we showed this cool thing that you can do in Postman, which is an abstracted auth helper that just kind of made it a little bit easier than copying and pasting.
Yeah, so there's another tip.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to, okay, so that's the additional resources. You'll have this. it's time to open up your browsers at home. Open up your phone, open up your browsers. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this webinar, we do have a survey. So go ahead and enter that bit.ly link into your browser and complete the survey. This is the first time we've had this type of webinar where we just kind of go deep in like, how is Ping using Postman? What are some things that other people can benefit from? So please give us our feedback. You get a chance to win something, Amazon gift card. So
is there a question about my hair in there? How does my hair look today?
Did you plant somebody to ask a question about your hair?
Yeah, in the survey, yeah.
Got it, in the survey. So let Anthony know how great his hair looks in the survey. Go ahead and grab that. It's bit.ly/ping-postman. And with that, we're gonna go to Q&A, and already I see a lot of interesting questions. You've really inspired people's curiosity. One question that I have for you, Ping people, is
how— Are you gonna keep us as tiny people up there?
Well, I was gonna, okay, let me now everyone's face is gonna be there, so. Okay, hopefully you see our faces bigger and some of our helpers behind the scenes answering your questions. One question I have for you is, how is Ping different from Okta? So some people might know Okta, identity company. How is Ping different from Okta?
Yeah, the Okta is in the same space as we are, but they're a little bit more downstream, down market than we are. We're kind of, Ping Identity is more focused on the enterprise use case. So if you have a lot of legacy apps, you have a lot of data requirements or code laws, or not code laws, data laws you have to follow, integrating with older apps, things like that, we're a little bit better suited for.
Okay, so I'm here in the Q&A. So if you have questions, please ask them in the Q&A section of Zoom. The first question I see in the queue is, how can Postman be used with accounts that require MFA authentication, multi-factor authentication? For example, PIN and RSA, that changes every minute.
I can take that one.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things I do. I sometimes test like multi-factor logins via Postman. And so I'd say the easiest way is if usually you're trying to get like an access token so that you can then run other requests. And so you can just have like a collection where it's like, do the first part, submit your username and password, submit OTP. And the request that I have will just have a space where it's like XXX. And then I'll just put in the OTP from my phone and then submit it. And then I don't save the request with that code because it's going to change every time. I just save the request with the easily clickable space that I can manually enter the OTP each time. And then hopefully you get a token, which is good for an hour or however long you need to be making requests.
And this doesn't exactly answer the question, but another kind of peripheral use case is if you have a very short-lived token, but you're going through like 200 requests or something like that, I'll see a lot of people put a pre-request script that checks the expiration or freshness of the token so that they can retrieve a new one if needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gideon didn't show, but you could have a runner set up too, where you have a collection that you just run through this whole thing and print out the access token or enter the OTP or whatever you need there. So.
Yeah, we're down with OTP. Anyone get that? Okay. Next question. Is there a way to use variables for client certificates, cert file, key file, instead of manually importing them every time?
I can take that. I've had to do that. There's a feature on Ping One for customers where you can use a custom domain, and we will ask you for your certificate file so that we can serve information on your subdomain that you give us. And the API request, the way it takes in that cert is the value of the cert is the like JSON value of a particular attribute. And so all Postman variables is just a string value. You just have to take that cert and put it into the string value in Postman, and then it'll be referenced by a variable and it'll be sent as the request. The one thing I will say though is just, you may have to play with the, because the way cert files are formatted, there's like a \n, like a new line in a certain way. we actually, speaking of scripts, we wrote a pre-request script that grabs the Postman variable, parses it, and makes sure it's formatted correctly, and then saves it as the correct value so that you can then send the request. Because I was doing something like cat copy from like X509 OpenSSL viewing the cert, and then pasting it into Postman, and then the pre-request script formats it. So it can be done. It's a little tricky, but the thing to remember is that the variable is a string that's going to be inserted into the HTTP request you make at the end of the day. And so you can eventually format it and tweak it until you get there.
So it can be done. If you have questions, you should tweet Gideon at Jason the Argonaut, I think, which is Jason, clever. All right. So next question we have here. Can one existing request be invoked from a pre-request or test script in another existing request without having to redefine the former in the script?
The answer is yes. I forget, and maybe Joyce, you remember, but Postman in its sandbox where you write your JavaScript, it does have the ability to execute a separate request. I'm not 100% sure if you can do that as the pre-request script. What I normally recommend is you can, as a post request, if you're running a collection in the runner that Anthony mentioned, you can set next request to be that request that you run a lot. And then on its test section that happens after the request is run, you can have logic that determines what request will be run next. And so it does take some effort, but you can actually have conditional logic in your test runs so that your collection, when automated, isn't just a linear path. But the simplest case I've done in the past is I'll be waiting for something to happen. And so I'll keep making a request, have a delay, rerun the same request, and then something will happen, then I'll go to the next request.
Yeah, so that's the postman.setNextRequest function, which sets execution order. However, you're not interrupting the flow. The main request that you're on will still run. There is a pm.send request that allows you to send asynchronous requests, but you're not calling another request in the within the collection. You're actually calling, you have to define it in that pm.send request.
Yeah. Currently, you still do have to duplicate that request that you're making.
Yeah. Okay, good questions here. Wow, advanced questions. Any reference materials on using Postman with MFA auth with RSA pin that changes every few minutes? Any reference? So we already kind of answered that question. Any reference?
I would point. Yeah, Jason, do you know of any, like, does the API documentation cover that?
I don't think we have stuff specifically on RSA pins. Or I mean, specifically about using it with Postman. That might be a more general Postman question than a ping question, I think.
I don't know that we have a MFA particularly, but we do have guides out there that show you how to like refresh and do it by API. I'm going to mark that one as done. Please ask your question again if you have follow-up. All right, in the last few minutes, let's try to get through as many of these. Speed round. How much of the API docs.ping identity is generated from Postman? Have you created your own custom docs on this website?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So we do reuse a lot of those requests that we do from Postman, but additionally, we also have a whole team of tech writers that are trying to write out all these scenarios of how people would be using our product and give them a little bit more in between the lines guidance. And that spans from stuff as like, how do you integrate with our sample apps, or just how does this stuff work behind the scenes from a flow diagram kind of perspective?
Yeah, but all that stuff is generated by Postman, right? I think that's what the question is.
The requests themselves are all generated through Postman, and also, I guess, because of that, they are also generated by Gideon writing his own Postman requests.
I actually took our docs, the API docs.ping identity, and uploaded that to the API network, so you can see the getting started guides and other things that Jason mentioned. So there are two Ping1 platform APIs. One's a reference that includes API docs, and the other one is more like the request that you're going to need to run without all the extra getting started guides and stuff like that.
All right, and the last question, how do you share scripts outside of a collection, between multiple collections? Can we use or import an external script?
I can take that one. So there's a couple things. One is, this is very fun. You can have scripts that run, you can save them at the folder level and at the collection level. And if a script is at the folder level, then every request in that folder will execute those scripts. So if you have a bunch of requests that do the same thing, like say a pre-request script that sets stuff up and then they have very similar logic at the end, you can pull that out and set it at the folder level, and then it'll trickle down to all of the individual requests. Look at the Postman docs to see the picture of the timing for when those scripts run. And similarly, you can pull them up to the collection level. Now, the other question, or the other way to do this is there are sometimes you want to have a function that like maybe takes arguments that you save at a higher level, and there is no context passing between these different sandboxes of where your scripts execute. So you can't have a pre-request script at the folder level that saves a variable that can be used at a lower level, like an individual request, unless you save it as a Postman variable. So if you do some JavaScript in, like say at the collection level in a script, and it gets a value, it can save it. It can do pm.environment.set or whatever level you want to set that variable. And then your lower level script will be able to grab it, and it'll be a string. And if it's like a JSON object, it can deserialize it and it can get that back. And if you like to live on the wild side, you can even do some fun stuff with, I think, exec, where you can pass around functions like that. Although definitely everyone should ping Postman to like increase the ability to do that a little more easily.
So I'll just chime in that this is kind of a peripheral question, but if you want to import an external library that's not already inbuilt to the Postman sandbox, you can pull something in by API. You can call the CDN and retrieve the package, and then you can eval it. I don't know if eval is the same as exec.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Eval. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's the JavaScript eval, and then now you have the package and you can use it. One of our lovely, lovely Postman solutions engineers, Matt Ball, created just like a local server running. So you can actually save scripts and then pull from your local, like just kind of like a library of scripts, and then pull it in from your local file system and then run it the same way with eval. So there's some ways to roll your own, but inbuilt, there's no like button that you push that's like import this script in the Postman. Okay, so I think we're done with Q&A. Hopefully we got a chance to answer most of your burning questions. If not, the lovely Postman team will get back to you with FAQs. A recording of this will be made public. We'll share the slides and everything so you can relive this glorious, glorious event, at home with your loved ones. But otherwise, Ping people, thank you so much for coming on this special webinar. Thank you so much for calling in from home. I hope you provided your feedback in the survey. Otherwise, did anybody have any community shout outs? Any last words?
So Anthony unmuted himself.
I'll let you go, Jason.
Yeah, I was just going to shout out, there's always new features being added to Ping One. This is the product manager and me speaking. But we have stuff that, is interesting besides our Postman collections, like webhooks and passwordless MFA. And these are all features you can find if you're looking for something like that. So please start a trial and check us out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, check out the Ping Identity TV YouTube channel too. There's a lot of basics on identity and some fun videos with Joyce here too.
Yeah, and I'll rep, if you YouTube search PostCon OAuth, you should get my video, and I'm in a race to keep having more views than Anthony's videos.
Gideon has a very highly rated Postman user conference PostCon talk from last year, so check that out as well. But thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you soon. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Thanks for having us.